So today let's talk about end-to-end testing with Cypress. And as I have mentioned before the lecture, really nice testing framework that I happen to love. And I would do this all day long if I could. It is really a great way to test. This is end-to-end testing, which we'll talk about. We'll do a bit of a comparison between Cypress and Jest. Go ahead and install and configure Cypress. We'll talk a bit about WSL. There are some extra steps, not many, just a couple of really easy steps we have to do before running Cypress and WSL. And then we'll go ahead and write some tests. We'll do some tests, some more advanced stuff, and we'll talk about doing network intercepts. Really mock data is what that really means with Cypress. All right, let's get started. So, of course, we're doing end-to-end testing, end-to-end testing. Now, we've heard of all kinds of testing. We've done our unit and integration testing, where, of course, unit is one function or one component, which, as we know now, is kind of the same thing in React. And integration is, well, it's more than one. So it's plus one, I guess. So any more than one function, that's really integration testing, okay? Where we're testing functions working together. Now, we're not talking about functions that contain other functions. That's still considered a single function. We're talking several functions interacting. So that is integration testing. So it really stands to reason that end-to-end testing, you'll all see it called A to Z or A to Z testing, kind of equivalent. End-to-end testing, A to Z testing, lots of different names for it. But those are the two most common. Really is just the logical extension of integration. Okay, it's just all of the functions working together. And all is more than one. So really end-to-end is just integration, but it's really all the functions. And we use it on the completed app. We don't normally do end-to-end testing during development, although we can. We can use these tools for doing unit and integration testing. We don't normally do that. And we'll talk about why in a few minutes. Okay, so we're testing all of it, and we test just like the user would use the app. That's an important point, just like the user. Now, I know you've had a talk with, it was Andy yesterday on integration testing using Jest. That is the kind of testing that's done during development. Automated testing that becomes part of a process. You push the files or you push the repo, and it triggers some tests to happen. Usually Jest tests in a React. But we normally run these tests in Cypress after everything's finished. And the reason is it's a lot slower. We have to now interact with the app just like user. Move the mouse around the screen. So move mouse, click items, type inputs, wait for stuff. So we're interacting just like a human would with the app. This is the final testing of the app. Does it work? Is it usable by a person? And this tends to be slower. I mean, people type slower. In Jest, as we know, we can inject a text variable into our input in one line of code. We simply create a targeted value and we stuff it in lightning fast. But in end-to-end, we type it in, and maybe we type slowly like a user. We'll talk more about that later. So these tend to be slower. So we couldn't put it as part of automate a process because it would just bog down. If we're pushing every 5 minutes, the test might take longer than 5 minutes. So we end up with this big backlog. Okay. Right. So let's compare with Jest. So Jest is command line based, CLI, command line interface, and very fast. It does take a few seconds to fire up, we know that, and kind of get everything ready. But once it's running, it's really, really fast. We go through those tests in milliseconds. Whereas Cypress is visual. It runs in its own browser. So we can actually see Cypress perform the tests and tends to be much slower. So for that reason, we usually do our end-to-end tests after. Now, interesting to note that although these are great tools, Jest and Cypress, and you're going to go, yeah, this is great. I love this business. Well, when you get out there, you're going to discover that a lot of companies, and I mean a lot, are still not there. Their idea of testing is hiring a room full of co-op students, giving them each a mouse and a keyboard and a piece of paper and say, go test this app. And that's their testing. And this is a thing, and I've seen some actually very large companies that would surprise you which companies still do this. They think that's testing because people in charge tend to not be that plugged into modern ecosystems. So to them, they're still thinking back in the 80s where computers are still new and we just have to test it with a couple people on a mouse. Or we take the Microsoft method of testing, which is write it, publish it, and wait for the complaints to come in, right? So, or some video games. Anybody had video games that are kind of glitchy sometimes? Yeah, I missed a few tests. Yeah, I don't play video games, but I've heard that they can be glitchy on occasion, especially when you get a brand new release. So it's actually still pretty rare. One of our people that graduated Lighthouse is actually one of the students staying at my house. And he goes, Gary, you won't believe it. I can't even describe what's happening. We've got a product done, we're ready to deploy it. And it's like on a USB drive. You have to walk it across to the server, plug it in, copy it to the server, and then we're testing it like by hand. It's like, what's going on? Yeah. So this is actually good news for us because it means opportunities, lots of opportunities in this space. A testing or a test developer is a very growing field, and it's a great job of being a developer who writes tests. And we've done a bit of, remember we did TDD back in the early stages. It was like years ago. It was like a couple months ago. TDD, where we develop based on tests. So being the person who writes those tests is a test developer, either before or after. And you write your tests to the requirements, of course. It's a fun job. You get to break stuff all day long. You get to write all these diabolical tests to break code. And it's fun. You get evaluated on how many bugs you find, not how few bugs you had. So test developer, great job, lots of opportunity, and very, very underserved in the industry. Some modern companies, usually smaller ones, startups that had a founder who knew what he was doing, tend to do this. Larger companies that have a founder who's or the founder is long dead, and they have a bunch of MBAs right in the company, whose idea of testing is like just hiring a room full of co-op students. Yeah, they tend to be a little slower. And it's really hard to push that inertia of these companies because they really resist it. They don't understand the value. So, but it's getting there. And as people realize, it becomes much more popular. And Cypress, being so visual, is a great thing to show senior management because they're visual, right? Like, show me a glossy. What's it look like? And you can look at it testing. Remember one of my first jobs years ago, my first consulting job, actually. I worked on a natural gas pipeline simulation system. It was a big project, a company called Novacore. And they paid everyone just gobs of money. It was like crazy money. And we were demonstrating to the CEO, yeah, great guy, by the way, and about how the stuff worked. And we got this new machine in. I think it was some new system. It seems slow now, but it was fast back then. And we demonstrated some stuff, and it was pretty cool. And he goes, "Oh, it's kind of cool." And then the person happened to do a directory listing, like ls minus al on the screen, very fast. That impressed the guy. Wow, that was fast. A bunch of files scrolling by. Oh, wow. Because that was visual. He could compare that to his computer, which was very slow in scrolling. So there's slightly different paradigms when you're talking to people that make decisions. So it's kind of funny. Well, that was pretty funny that we demonstrated all the cool software, which he kind of yawned at, and then a directory listing that went fast, that impressed the guy. So it was pretty funny. So great opportunities, test developer. I encourage you to know this stuff. This is not a chore. Knowing testing is a great thing to know. Unit testing, integration testing, and end-to-end testing, really great things and tons of opportunity. Okay. Okay, so how do we go ahead and use Cypress? That's the whole idea, because we're going to be using Cypress, which is the tool for today. Let's go ahead and take a look at Cypress. Cypress testing. There we go. All right. And I always go to the wrong link because I go to the wrong one. Let's go here, cypress.io. Okay. One thing about Cypress, they have a really amazing website. Their documentation is second to none. I have never seen a better automated or better well put together website as far as documentation is concerned. It's really, really good. Okay. Schedule a meeting. Close that. There we go. All right. So as you can see, you can install Cypress using npm, and that is the common way to run Cypress. Okay. And if I click on that, oh, copies to my clipboard. Look at that, just a little touch like that. When I click on something, it does a copy to my clipboard so I can paste that in. So we go npm install Cypress. And they even give us a video. Oh, I wonder what npm install Cypress will do. Let's find out. There. In case you're not clear on what npm does, you can go ahead and install Cypress. Go ahead and go to our doc. Docs. We'll go to the getting started. And where's my installing Cypress? There we go, installing Cypress. Installing. So you can go npm install Cypress save dev. We'll talk about this in a minute because that's an interesting point, okay? Whether or not we go save dev, right? And let's take a look what happens. So this is what happens. Oh, that's what npm does. Okay, I didn't know that. Hey, so little things like that, they've gone ahead and added to the documentation, and all their documentation is like this. It is really amazingly documented. And there's a Cypress console, right? Okay, so the documentation is fantastic. It's a really good program that is just really, really put together well. And they've thought of these things. I can guarantee this was written by developers for developers, because the things they do are just, yeah, they thought of that. That's amazing. Okay. So we're going to install Cypress with npm install Cypress. Now let's talk about this. We're the end-to-end testers. The app is finished. Development is done. So we don't need to even look at the code. And with Cypress, we do not look at the code. The only thing that we test with Cypress is a URL. That's all we know. We haven't got the code. In this case, I happen to have some code here, but we might not have that. In fact, our test department might be in a different city than the developers, and we've never seen the code. They just said, yeah, go test this URL. They give us this HTTPS : whatever, and we go there and we test it, never having seen the code at all. So in this case, we might not even have access to the code. So would we save as a save dev? Well, no, because we haven't got the code. Our project, our NPM project, might be the testing. That may be the purpose of our project. So in this case, it is just npm install because the Cypress is the main part. Our project is all about testing. This does happen. We have maybe two repos, one that contains the code and one that contains the Cypress tests separately developed by the test team. It depends. We're going to go ahead and integrate it into our project because I do have the code here. But it might be that you're making a project that is only testing with no source code of the application at all. Okay. So we're going to install Cypress using npm installer I, either one, Cypress, but we're going to install a particular flavor of Cypress. And Compass stresses this well. We're going to install Cypress 9. The reason for that is it's a simpler Cypress and it's a bit easier to use. And the main reason is, well, the Compass instructions work with version 9. So they're going to break if you have anything else. So we're going to go version 9. I'm going to pick version 9.7.0. And that's the version we're going to use. So install Cypress 9.7.0. We can go save dev in our case if we're embedding it in an existing project. So either way, we'll do this ourselves, okay? But do not forget the @970. Otherwise, it'll install Cypress 13 or 14, and all your tests will break. It's the same Cypress, just a little slicker and a little easier to use than the later Cypresses. Let's go ahead and try that on my machine. Let's grab this. There. I've got my terminal open somewhere. There's my app running. There. Okay. There's my directory. So I'm going to go ahead and install Cypress. npm install save dev Cypress 9.7.0. Now, one thing Compass does say, they say install -G. I would avoid doing that, honestly. And there's a reason for that. Cypress is actually an executable. It is a program. It has a node component to it, but it's mostly a program. It installs on your computer anyway. It is -G. It installs in your cache directory, in your home directory as a binary. So -G is kind of pointless. And I tend to avoid anything with -G in my node. So I always go save dev like this. Let's give it a try. Now, it's not bad. It will install a few things to begin with. There is a big pause in the middle where it seems to be doing like nothing. Mine is done already, so it won't happen. But it will pause for quite a while. I go, is this thing broken? What's happening? That's the npm installer downloading the actual packaged Cypress binary. I think it's checking it right now to make sure I've got it. So just wait, be a little patient. It's pretty big, and it'll carry on and install Cypress on your machine. That wasn't so bad. It'll be a little slower for you. There it is. It's installed. Okay. And that's great. Take a quick look. Let's take a look here. Let's open up another window here, my Lighthouse. There. I believe it installs in my cache directory right here, this directory. I'll double check. Let's cd to .cache. And there it is. So put Cypress here. So all the binaries for Cypress actually end up here. It installs two. For some reason, it installs 9.7 and a 9.1. I have no idea why. It just does that. cd 9.7, Cypress, and there's a bunch of binary files that are pretty big, 5 megabytes. So it's fair size, right? So there is the actual Cypress program, and it has a node npm interface. And that's what got installed here. It installed just the interface of Cypress for your node. All right. Okay. So I have a little app that I built. The question is, should we look in the warnings that always occur? Nah, not for development. I'd be surprised if you didn't get any of these. I'm using, I think, Node 16 now. Yeah, version 16. So there's always little vulnerabilities. In a company, it makes a difference. Sure, I should probably address some of these, and those I should address for sure. But for development purposes, nah, I wouldn't worry about that at all. Okay. All right. So I've got a little app running. Let's take a look. I've got it right here. I'm going to go npm start. There we go. I think I stopped it. Oh, it's running already. Okay. Must have another terminal. It looks like this. There it is. It is the album search. This is one of the apps that we write to demonstrate how to use APIs. Very simple little app. I can type stuff in my input. If I go Beyonce, it waits a second, then it searches, and I get all the albums by Beyonce. Here we go. Or if I go Queen, I get all the albums with Queen and Adam Lambert. Okay, I'll not look at that one. Okay, great. I can do filters. I can filter out things like maybe I don't want to see any explicit, so all the red ones disappear from the 90s, 2000s, that kind of stuff, right? So a very simple little app. Now, that's about as much as I need to know about this app. I just need to know I can type stuff in, it'll fetch my stuff, it's got some checkboxes. So I'm going to go ahead and test this app. I've got a URL, and as far as I'm concerned, this is all I have. I just have that local host 8765 and nothing else, right? So knowing that, we're going to go ahead and start Cypress, right? Let me take a look. I think this is running already. Double check. Yes, it is. It's running. Great. Okay. So to start Cypress, if you're using Windows with WSL, there is a very small extra step you have to perform. And that step does not include installing this thing called VX serve something, whatever. No, that is not the step. Compass tells you to do this. Please skip that step. If you have already installed it, please uninstall it. It will interfere with your Cypress. That's kind of important, okay? It's much easier. WSL, which by the way is a fantastic tool, it is now the number one tool. It beats Mac and Linux now as far as development environments. Fantastic. It has come a long way even in the last year. And they've added X Windows to it now. So it has its own built-in X. It's just one of those, that's Linux graphic UI stuff. It's called X or X Windows. Okay. It's now built into WSL. So all you have to do to enable Cypress, or for that matter, any Linux program to use your desktop, is simply set the display. It's called display. It's a variable. Like I've got one here. Let me take a look. And if I go grep display, oh, there we go. Mine's already set. Okay. Yours may be different. You may have it set to something like an IP address, colon something, something. Yeah, you don't need that. With WSL, you just need display to be :0. To do that, we simply go export display equals :0. There. I have this put inside my startup script for my bash when I log in, or do it by hand. But you must have this, and that's all I need to get Cypress working. So everything else that Compass says about Cypress running, don't worry about that. Just use display equals :0. And by the way, this allows any Linux program to run. I could actually install the Linux version of Firefox on this Linux, start it, and I would get a Linux Firefox come up. I tried it. It's really cool. It looks like Linux. It's super cool. They just added this WSL just recently, so it's really killing everyone. I can't believe it came from Microsoft. I think they probably bought it. I don't think they wrote it themselves. I think they bought somebody else because this is so good. All right, so now I've set my display. So now I'm going to go Cypress. Now, what I need to do, I need to go my package.json, and add a Cypress entry. So I'll make one here. I'll call it Cypress. Now we can go Cypress, call it open or Cypress. I'll just call it Cypress for now. It doesn't really matter. And the command is going to be Cypress open. And what this means is telling us to open Cypress in interactive mode. Okay, there are many modes of Cypress, or several modes. This is the one we use during development. So this is development mode for Cypress. And that's it. There. Let's give it a try. So close that. And I'm going to go npm run Cypress. npm run Cypress. You get a whole bunch of warnings. Totally ignore those. And Cypress should start on my computer. Take a look. Cypress open. Ignore all those. Yeah, there we go. And there's Cypress. Success. Okay. Minimize that. Don't need that anymore now. This is the Cypress dashboard. Now, one thing about the dashboard. Do not make it full size. No, don't do that. You don't need that. Keep this thing nice and small. We barely use this screen. Okay, this is like the dashboard only. This is not our main screen. So keep this nice and small. Okay. Second thing, do not be tempted by all the update now nagging that you get. Okay. Make sure that you stick to version 9.7. They will say, would you like to update? Just say no. So just say no. Otherwise, it will update and you'll end up with a different version, which will cause problems for you. So welcome to Cypress. We've created some sample tests. Oh, very cool. Let me look at my project. Hey, look at this. They've added a Cypress directory to my project with a bunch of stuff. So I have a bunch of new files in my project now. All right. So there's a few directories. We'll talk about some of them. But the one we're interested in right now is this integration directory. And this contains our tests. So there's some tests and there's a bunch of tests. And they also show up on our Cypress dashboard as well. All right. So now what? Well, now we can run some of our tests. So I've got a test here. Let me run this one. This is a little test. To run the test, you just click on the test. So click on the test, and now the actual Cypress starts up in a larger window. It's creating its own browser. So it has an integrated browser in it, and it's going to access this website and do some stuff. Oh, that's not me. Here's my hands. See? That's Cypress doing some stuff. Very cool. This is awesome, isn't it? Cypress is really awesome. It's like a video game. Just watch it run your tests. And you can see each of these tests. So each of these is an individual test. And you can watch what happened during the test. I love Cypress. Look at that. Compare that to something like Jest. We had to watch the screen scroll by. This is awesome. Like, what happened here? Okay, I did this, and watch the progression of your test. Very cool. Let's look at this test. Another test with all this stuff I did. Very cool. So Cypress really is awesome. And the tests are very visual. It's all done in this browser. You can watch every single step of your tests visually. So if you're a visual person, you're going to love Cypress. It really is a joy to use. So let's go ahead and write some tests in Cypress. So what we're going to do first off, let's go back to our dashboard, which is right here. We don't need these tests, so they even give us the option to, let's just delete these example files. Because we have all these files here they created for us, but we don't need them. They're good for examples, but for the day, we're not going to look at access. So I'm going to click just delete. That's a nice touch. I could have deleted them myself, but I'll just click there. No thanks. Delete the files. Sure. And now, oh, my integration directory is empty. Okay. So I'm going to create my my first Cypress test. Go to integration, and I'm going to make a file. I'm going to number them 1-. I just do that so they show in order. It's a common scheme sometimes for testing as well. I want these tests to show and also execute in a certain order. That's just my convention for today. You may have a different convention, or the company you work for may have a different way of doing it. That's just the way I'm doing it today. I'm going to make a test, call it my first dot spec.js. So Cypress tests are called .spec in this version. They changed the extension, I think, after version 10 to, I think, .ede or something similar. But for now, they're .spec. One thing you will notice that they are not .test, are they? It's like, wait a second, these are test files. Why didn't Cypress call them .test.js? Seems kind of odd. They would call it .spec. Well, let's think about that. In this case, I'm integrating my tests into my overall application, right? And I've been working on my React, and I've been running my unit tests, my integration tests in Jest. What would happen if I now have a bunch of .test.js Cypress test files embedded in my application, and I ran my Jest tests? Well, Jest is going to find them because it looks for .test.js, doesn't it? As does Mocha. So we might have a conflict. So Cypress had to pick something a bit different, and they chose .spec, or for later versions, they chose a different extension, but it's very similar. Okay, so this is my test there. Let's go to my dashboard, and you notice it's noticed I have a test. Take a look. Let's start this non-existent test. Oh, well, no tests found. Okay, well, that makes sense. Okay, so there were no tests in this file. So it didn't like crash on me. It just gave me a nice friendly message saying, hey, no tests. Okay, so let's go ahead and write ourselves some tests. So we've learned, of course, Mocha tests with Chai. We've learned Jest tests. Now we have to learn something new again. Well, turns out that Jest or Cypress is based on things we already know. And the first one is Mocha. Cypress is based on Mocha. It uses the Mocha test runner, okay, as its to run its tests. So our tests can look like Mocha tests. We have a describe block. Describe block. There it is. Describe. And I would call this just I'll call this my tests to say that Cypress is running. So tests to confirm Cypress works. There. Okay. And you probably guessed we're going to have either an it or a test. Now you can be on team it or team test. I'm now on team it only because it's more common. All right. So we do have an it, and we could say, well, it works. It works. Okay. So there's my test. It works. So there is my very first file, test file. Let's go to my tests. Oh, works. Look at that. It found my test, and much like Jest, it detected my test change and it ran my tests. And look at that. I got a passing test for doing nothing. Of course, we know why that is. Tests are all based on assertions, aren't they? So there was no assertions. The test must have passed. Nothing went wrong, so everything must be good. And although that's kind of nice, I didn't really test anything at all. So I should probably add an assertion. So Cypress has a built-in assertion library as well. And guess which assertion library they chose to embed? Anybody? Who wants to guess what they chose? Well, if you guessed Chai, yeah, you'd be correct. They use, among other things, they use Chai assertions. So I can add a Chai assertion. I can say assert dot equal. And I'll do a simple one. True is true. That's a pretty safe assertion. Let's look at my test. And sure enough, it works. And yes, my assertion true is true. And it works. Let's do another assertion. Let's maybe do assert that true is false. Probably not the world's best assertion. So, oh, my first assertion passed, my second assertion failed, and it tells me exactly where this happened. And it says I expect the true to equal false. Pretty visual. Compared to the usual way of doing tests in the command line, this beats it, doesn't it? This is great. You can see every step nice and friendly. It's kind of red, not really in your face red, more of a like a rosé red. So it's not so intimidating. Yeah, it's really nice. Okay, I love Cypress. It's really awesome. Okay, so of course this is pretty simple stuff. Let's go ahead and do something that we are going to test for real. Let's go ahead and visit a website. So to do this, the first thing we should probably do, we make extensive use of the Cypress documentation. It is really, really good. So how do I visit a website? Just click for visit. It turns out every command or directive in Cypress is very intuitive. Sci.visit. All the base commands with Cypress start with sci. Sounds so friendly. Sci, there's my friend Sci. Yes, sci.visit. And here's the common usage. Here, and here's the correct usage. Sci.visit / give it really anything, and it will visit. You can give it an object if you want, but we're going to just give it a URL. Now, Cypress documentation is fantastic. If there were possible ways you could incorrectly use it, they would show that. They show correct usage. They will also show you common incorrect usage. In this case, it's just a visit. But they go on to explain you can pass it some options, all these different ways you can visit a site. And this is for a visit. Like, that's amazing. They show examples, what can go wrong, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Amazing documentation just to visit a website. So we're going to go ahead and go site.visit. So let's do site.visit. And what's the URL? It was this. Let's grab that. We're going to try to visit the website of our app. So we'll go our new test can visit the website. Okay. And we'll say sci.visit. And we'll give it a URL. Let's watch my tests. Okay. So I've got one failing test. That's fine. There. Now you notice my test failed, right? So let's just assert this, unassert this one. There. There. And now both tests run. First one works. Yeah, true is definitely true. And visit the site. It shows me there's my visit. Now it's not much to see. It said it did a get there. So yeah, all worked. Okay. We'll go through this more as to how we use this little control here. This is very, very useful in tracing the progress of our tests. Okay, so definitely works. We've got this browser. Now, interesting to note about this browser. This is a nice viewport that shows what's happening, but this is not just a viewport. This thing's alive. I can click on stuff. It's a live browser. It's not read-only. I can type stuff in. There. Ah, it's held up by Cypress right now. So this thing is live. And you notice it's showing me the resolution that is set for this browser. Right now I'm set to 1000 by 660. I can adjust that. If I click on that, watch this. It tells us, look, if you want to adjust this, take that object and put this in the file cypress.json. Just a nice touch. Let's do that. I want to adjust my resolution slightly. Let's go to my, oh, sure enough, they've added a file, cypress.json. Let's add this. Put that there. I'll make it maybe just something simple. I'll say 1080. Why not? Just something simple. Maybe by 800 or 900. There. Some random resolution because I want to see how my tests perform or how the app performs under this resolution. Because you might think, well, my app can run in a variety of devices, maybe on a phone, a tablet, a computer. I should probably test how it behaves under all these situations. For example, is the button even showing on a phone? Is it clickable or is it off the screen? These are things Cypress can do. They'll say, this thing's not visible. You can't click on it. Okay, let's look at our test now. And if I go here, you notice, oh, my test got closed. Since I changed kind of a fundamental configuration of Cypress, it closed all my tests. And I have to open it again. It's going to reopen it, but it's going to reopen it in the new resolution, which is now 1080 by 900. And how does my app look in 1080 by 900? Well, looks about the same, a little wider, that's all. Okay, so there is my app. So let's go ahead and write some real tests. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to test a couple things about this app. Now, we're the end-to-end testers, and we're kind of the last line of defense for this app. So we want to make sure that visually this app works and that a user can use it. So we're going to test some really fussy little things. For instance, here's some checkboxes here. Do those work? I don't know. Find out. Well, looks like I can test they work, but I should test that. Do the checkboxes actually work? Can I uncheck and check these checkboxes when I click on the box? Are they checkable? Are they uncheckable? Maybe they're disabled, maybe not even visible. So I'm testing these really hard questions about this app because we're the last line of defense. We're the ones that need to verify that this app works. So we're testing just the fussiest little thing. Does the checkbox even work? Make yourselves a test. I call this one 2-checkbox. spec.js. There, okay. And it's gonna be very simple. Let's grab this because I'm lazy and I've never gotten in trouble copy and pasting before, of course. So there. Okay, so there is my test. And I'll say this is the test of the checkboxes. So test, this is tests for the checkbox filters. There, okay. And I want to test if I load this app, this explicit checkbox should initially be green or checked. If I click it or I uncheck it, it should go to the state of unchecked. That's kind of my test, okay? So checked, and it changes state to unchecked. Okay, so I'm going to say can uncheck the explicit checkbox filter. There. Make sure you give your tests some meaningful names. This is very important. If all your tests just said do stuff and you had 1,000 tests and they ran at 2 in the morning and you got a report the next morning that says, oh, test number 1,243 failed, do stuff. It's not very useful. So try to give your test meaningful names. We talked about this before. So first part of the test is, of course, you can visit the site. So let's go to my test. I'll close this old one and I'm going to open my new test. So now I have 2 tests. Let's run my checkbox. Now it's probably going to work because we tested this before. And sure enough, I can visit the site. There, it does work. So I'm going to build my tests incrementally, step by step, one line at a time, which is great because I can confirm each line works before moving on to the next line. Let's go ahead and do this. So what I want to do is I want to find that checkbox. Now, remember doing this in Jest was not easy, was it? Remember using testing library? That was hard. Get by role, get by ID, get by text, get by... find by, query by, find all by. Oh, man, it goes crazy, right? So remember back like week 4, we wrote our very first single page app, Tweeter. Anybody miss Tweeter? That was fun those days, right? With jQuery, we do things like dollar and then just get the darn thing, like dot my class. That was so easy. Wouldn't it be great if Cypress had something like this instead of all that get by, dump the DOM? Well, it turns out that yes, Cypress uses CSS selectors as well to find stuff. And this is one of the best things about Cypress. We can find things the easy way. So I just need to find out, what is this thing? Let's go to my app. I've got it running here, and I'm going to inspect that. Let's go inspect that checkbox. I can do that. I've got a browser. Let's find out what I want to find. So there it is. Make it bigger so I can see it. There it is. There. Okay, so it looks like, here it is. It looks like it's inside a bunch of divs that are called class of filters form group. So I'm going to find it the hard way first, okay? So let's try to find these divs because I've got all these divs. Each one of these divs looks like one of those filters. So each checkbox is one of these filters here. Yeah, there they are. I can see them moving on my browser. So there's all my filters. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to grab really the same as the dollar function. It's the same thing. Just get the thing you want. So I want to get those divs with the class of filters form group. Okay, so it's a class, so it's dot filters underscore underscore form group. There. I'll leave it at that for now. Let's go to my test and watch what happened. Okay. Okay, so did I spell it incorrectly? Let's take a look. So filters form group, I did. It's form dash group. Let's take a look. Sure enough, form dash group. Now, if you notice, there's a bit of a pause. It waited for it to appear. We'll talk about that later. When I ran my test, Cypress didn't fail immediately. It waited for like 8 or 10 seconds, and then it timed out. So it's filter form dash group. Okay, tests are running. Oh, that was fast. Visit the site. Look at that. It found all 4 or 5 of those things. I love Cypress. It's really awesome. Okay, now I've got those things. Well, I want to get the first item. Well, dot first, just like jQuery. Get the first one. Let's watch what happens here. Visit site, get my 5, get the first. Started like Cypress, it really is fun to use. Okay, so I've got the first. Okay, so I got the first div. So now, and I want to get the input inside that div. I'll just say get the input. I can probably use a jQuery.find. So I'll just do .find. So I'll say .find, and I want to find an input, an element called input. There, okay. On my test, there it is. So got the first div. Inside the div, I got the first input, which is an input of type checkbox. Okay. So now I want to know, can I uncheck this checkbox, or is it uncheckable? Now you might think, well, just click it, but you can click anything. I want to know, can I actually uncheck this thing? Because Cypress is self-asserting. For example, if I hadn't found this thing, we found that out, my test will assert. Well, if I try to do an action, I want to uncheck a checkbox. That's an action. Let's take a look at Cypress, by the way. What do they say about how I would uncheck a checkbox? Let's go uncheck a checkbox. Uncheck. Oh, well, looks like that's the command, uncheck. Okay, we go uncheck, and that's kind of it. Okay, correct usage, you have to get something first, then uncheck it. You can't just go sci.uncheck. That's the incorrect usage. I love this documentation. It's really detailed. So we have to find something first. Could have done this, I suppose. Type of checkbox. Okay. And then dot uncheck. Let's try that. Let's go dot uncheck. There. Easy enough. Let's take a look what happens in my test. Okay, my test runs. Oh, kind of cool. So do my get the first, and uncheck it. And you notice it's flashing back and forth. It shows you the before and the after of the action. So before I unchecked it, it looked like that. After, if I click on it, I can freeze it and just go before and after. It's kind of hard to see because it's got this red dot, but for every action you perform, any kind of event you send, you can see exactly what that event did. It's really, really cool. Love this stuff. Okay, so great. Okay, so I unchecked it. Now, if I tried to uncheck something that wasn't uncheckable, for instance, let's just comment this thing here. Let's just, can I do this? Probably can't do that. That's incorrect. Let's do that instead. I'm going to get the first div and try to uncheck that div. What's going to happen? Well, I'm trying to uncheck something that's not uncheckable. Yeah, it says, wait a second, you're trying to uncheck that thing's not checkable. So it is not a checkbox. So clearly my test fails. So these are self-asserting. Most actions, most everything in Cypress is self-asserting. Okay. So now what? It's now uncheckable. I should probably verify that it really is not checked now. And that'd be an assertion. I'd put a should. So chai should. I'll say should. And there's lots of them. Put a string in here, and here's they come up in VS Code. Look at this. There's so many of these. Should be called, should be called once, should be, oh, should be checked. Well, I want should be unchecked. Is there a should be unchecked? Let's take a look. No, there isn't a should be unchecked, but there's a should be checked. I saw that word. There it is. Should be checked, but I want it should not be checked. So you can add in front of any should directive a dot not, or should not be checked. That's my assertion. Should not be checked. Let's take a look. So there's my almost complete test. Look at that. Visit the site, get all 5, get the first, find the input, uncheck it, should not be checked. Now, technically, I probably should have added maybe here that it should be checked. Perhaps I should have added before this test that it should be checked. Not a bad test. So maybe to be a little more precise, I probably should have said should be checked and then uncheck it. I think that probably makes sense. So I'll add. There we go. So this is the assertion, uncheck. So you can have multiple assertions. And by the way, uncheck can happen as much as you want. It doesn't hurt anything. You can do multiple unchecks. It's not like a click. It is actually unchecking that checkbox, not toggling it. Okay. So that works. All right. So now let's try something else. Let's do another test. I want to find out for my site, because checkboxes are pretty small. Like they're tiny. And if this is a phone, my fingers, this is not going to fit on the checkbox. So I want to make sure if I check on the text beside it, it also has the same effect as checking and unchecking the checkbox. Let's confirm that this happens. So make another test. I'll make another it. I'm going to call this can check the, I'll go with the EP. The EP filter by clicking on the label. Right. So it starts off the same way. I can use this code. I've got my visit. That's fine. I'll just add this here. We'll talk about this in a second. Okay, but now I want to get this label. Let me inspect this thing. Let me go to my browser here. Let's grab that label. Right click on that. We're going to go inspect. Okay, so it looks like it's here. And inside the div, it's the second thing. No, I could do it the same way. I could do the get the group, but then I have to get the last one. That's a bit trickier. But turns out what I can do instead, I just want to find something that contains the text EP because it's the only thing on the screen. There's nothing else on the screen that has the text EP. So I kind of did the hard way on you guys the first time. I'll do it the easy way this time. I want to find anything that contains the text EP. And there's a directive called contains, sci.contains. Sci.contains EP. Find something on the screen that contains. Now we know this concept of content, right? Where you have containers that are open and close pointy brackets, and the stuff in between, that is the content. So I want to find something with content of or that contains EP. And there's my open and close pointy brackets, EP in there. Let's take a look. And sure enough, it found something. It found the label. Great. Now, what should I do to that label? I got to click it. Yeah, just click. And there is a dot click. No parameters, just dot click. Let's take a look. That's an action. So it'll show me the before and the after, which it did. And sure enough, looks like it's changing. And now click would be very rare to assert because you can pretty much click on anything on a page. So it's unlikely a click will ever fail on you. Okay, so I should probably check if this thing's unchecked. Let's take a look. Well, may all do a should. Dot should, the same thing, be checked. Let's try that, see what happens. Okay. Okay, well, that's kind of weird. Oh, well, look at this. What happened? It said, assert to be checked. You're expecting a label to be checked, dude. That's not going to happen. So yeah, I expected the label to be checked. A label can't have a state of checked or unchecked, can it? So I messed up my test. Ah, darn. So it looks like I still have to go ahead and get that checkbox. Let's take a look. All right. So it turns out the checkbox has an ID VP. So I'll just grab that. Now, much like with testing library, there are best practices for finding things. They tell us try to avoid IDs, but we'll do it today because we didn't add any test IDs to this, honestly. So we're going to grab that ID of EP. Let's do a sci.get. Sci.get, which is the easy way, and we'll just get hash EP, and that thing should be checked from my test. Okay, and sure enough, when I do my get EP, and yes, it is checked. My test passed. So very visual, very easy. Now, much before, this is Mocha, so we can go dot only on a test. And I usually do this. I do a dot only. That way, it doesn't collapse like before. This way, it expands my test and shows me. So I almost always put a dot only on my tests when I'm working on them. Just don't forget to take them off. Just don't forget that because your test won't run. Okay. Let's do one more thing before the break. You notice I've got a bit of redundant code, don't I? Anyone notice I'm doing this twice? Probably not the best idea. So what I can do is I can make this code run before every test. And there is a before each directive, and it's Mocha. We know that. If we can spell it, yes. And I'll just have it do the following thing before each test. It's going to visit the site. Go ahead, just add that. So before every test in this file, now it visits my site. See if we get the same results. Take a look. Oh, so far so good. Looks like it's working. So now it even tells you, I did this before each. Isn't this cool? Isn't Cypress awesome? It tells you exactly what happened step by step. This happened because you had it in the for each. You did a get. Then you got the first. There's your stuff. It all worked. So very, very visual. Really love Cypress. Okay. let's break for a short time and then we'll come back and continue with Cypress. We'll take our attendance now. So what we'll do is I'll get everyone in the chat, maybe type something like Cypress is awesome, or Cypress might be awesome, haven't quite decided yet, or Cypress is looking pretty good so far, or no, I hate Cypress. Please don't say that. Okay, and that is our attendance for today. All right, everyone, let's take a short 10-minute break and I'll see everyone in 10. So last time we left, we had just checked our check boxes. Looks like it all worked. Let's go through a couple little things here. Now, you notice my pattern here. I did SATA contains EP click, and then I got the checkbox. I probably, like in my previous test, I probably should have checked that when that page loaded the first time, when I did a get, I should have confirmed that it was initially unchecked. So maybe I should do this. I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to say should not be checked. I want to do a nice complete test. When the page loads, it should not be checked. I find the label, click it, and then it should be checked. Let's take a look at my test. All right, so it looks like that worked. Now, here's a real important point about Cypress. You notice I've got some redundant code here. You would think, why not just make a variable const? I'll call it my EP equals. Then I'll say EP should not be checked and EP should be checked. Because that makes sense in JavaScript, doesn't it? And this may work, but more times than not, it doesn't work so well. In fact, oh, well, look at that. Didn't work, okay? So, and Cypress talks about this in their best practices. This is a different object than this. This was the old object that was not checked. So if we refer to the old object again, we're going to get it not checked. So you should always have your gets discrete. We very, very seldom use variables in Cypress tests. That's an important point. I made that mistake too when I first did this, and I paid the price as well. My test all failed. So always do each get as a discrete get. Double check our test. How's it looking now? And it's all passing. Now, one thing you may notice, right now I'm testing this localhost 8765 site. But what if my site was someplace else? It's probably not going to be on my machine forever, but I've got my URL hard coded inside my tests. Probably not a good idea. And if I had like 1,000 of these files, maybe a couple hundred of these files, each with 10 tests each, I would have to go and edit each file and change that URL. So instead, I should probably pull that out, and you probably guessed where it's going to go in my cypress.json. And we have a item called base URL like this. And like double quotes, there we go. There, okay. It would be very uncommon for Cypress tests to not have a base URL. Every test I've worked on always has this. And that's like one file, like a simple little test. So you will always have one of these. And now what this means is I can go just visit slash instead. There, because it's relative. Let's watch what happens. Go back to my test. Oh, my test closed. Look at that. In fact, Cypress noticed I made a change. I can just say try again. So it closed my test because I ran up. Try again. Come on. Nope. We'll just stop and start Cypress. The base URL sometimes does that. We get that happening sometimes. Let's go back to my Cypress. Oops. There we go. Yeah, it stopped because of the invalid JSON I gave it. It kind of choked on that. Not a big deal. Start it up again. Okay. And there's my test. Oh, I bet you I got some invalid JSON. Let's take a look. BCRL, what's it say in here? It says, do a fully qualified, oh, did I type it wrong? Oh yeah, look at that, a space in there. Yeah, look at that. Ah, totally planned in this lecture, by the way. So look at that. Yes, there we go. Try again. I guess I should have read the error message, shouldn't I? Okay, there's my checkbox test. Run it again. Looks promising. Unchecks. And now it's still running, but now it says before each visit slash. Look at that. So it knows that I'm using my base URL. All right. Let's do some more tests here. What I want to test now is, can I type into this input field? So if I type in BGs, well, I'm really going back with some old groups. BGs, okay. Wow, look at this, and they're still staying alive. Look at that. Are they all alive? I'm not even sure. Okay, so the BGs. So I can type. I can in fact type. Look at all these old groups I've got here. Wow. Okay, so I can type into this, and that's. I just want to know: can I type? Is it something that I can type into? Is it disabled? So I want to find this input and type into it just like a person would. Let's make a test for that. So make another one. I will call this our typing spec. Let's make a file 3-typing.spec.js, which I totally spelled wrong. Okay. So I'll grab my first test right here. It's kind of useful. I'll grab the whole thing and I'll delete. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so we're going to say test for the input field. Now we'll say we can type, oops, we can type into the search input or a search field. So there's my test. I can type into it. So first I have to get this thing. So what is this? Try to find this thing. This is, let's inspect it and take a look. Okay, so it looks like it's inside a form with a class of search form, and there's an input of type radius. I can't just find input because these are also inputs. So I can't just search for all the inputs, can I? I could do get all the inputs, get the first, but that's a little dangerous because they might be responsive and in different orders. So I want to be careful with that. So I'm going to be a little more specific. I'm going to find the form and then find the input inside that form. All right, sounds good. That's my plan. So I'll do a sci.get, which we know, sci.get, and I'm going to get a form with a class of search underscore underscore form, which I've spelled wrong. I know. There we go. Okay, get search underscore underscore form. I'm going to stop. Now this is my old test. I'll close that one. Go back to my Cypress, and now I've got my third test. Let's open our third test. Success. So I got the form. So I just want to get the input. So I'll just go ahead and do a find because it's contained within. So I'm going to find the input with a class of radius, just to be a little more specific. It is actually dangerous using UI styling classes to find things because those can change. And Cypress mentions this, but it's all I got right now. So, but technically I should use something, maybe an ID or even better, a test ID. It's specific. So really, because all we have is a DOM, and that's all I got. I could maybe have looked for with placeholder, but all I had was input radius. So I'm going to go with that. Let's check my test. Okay, and it did find input with a class of radius. And now I want to type into it. So what directive or command do we think that Cypress had for typing? Well, you probably guessed it's just type. And I'm going to type in Taylor Swift. There. Take a look at our test. And sure enough, Taylor Swift typed very, very quickly. Okay. So works great. And it worked. Look at that. Our test again. Does her get, does her find, and types Taylor Swift. Now that was pretty fast. I can't type that fast. I think the default is like a couple milliseconds in between very, very quickly. It's not like instant like was with Jest, but it's still, what is that? That's got to be maybe 10, 20 milliseconds. Very, very fast. Okay, so let's look at the how to type. See what they tell us in Cypress. Okay, so type, give it some text. We have to do a get. We can't do sci.type. That's important. We'll talk about this in a second. We cannot just do a sci.type. And we can type, and we give it some options. Look at some options. We can type some special characters. Very cool. Wow, a home button, escape. We can inject all kinds of cool characters and keystrokes. Even an alt key. Look at this. Wow. Have some options. Whatever that means. Okay. Delay. Yeah, I was right. It's 10 milliseconds. So let's change the delay. We're going to give it, and most sci commands have an options argument. And it's in the form of a object. So we give it a delay, a delay of 250. Kind of slower typing. Let's watch what a test looks like now. That's a little more normal, I think. So we can test our app and how it responds to people typing at different speeds. Because we know that when this app runs, it waits for a couple of seconds and then you see the spinning bar. So it looks like it has a certain timeout. If you type too slow, it's going to fetch right away. So we're going to see how this app behaves with people typing at different speeds. Right. This works. Okay. Now, there's no need to insert because it's typable. If I couldn't type into that, for instance, if it was a disabled input, it would assert. Okay. So let's do another quick test. Can I backspace? So we'll say, will the input handle backspaces? Can I make corrections? Will handle backspace. I mean, someone's got to test this. If not us, then who? We should test, does this site behave like it should? If I type a backspace, does it work? Okay, so I'm going to maybe put 2 R's and I can inject a special character. We do this with curly braces. And I can say backspace literally. Let's watch this work. There's our test. I totally should have put only, shouldn't I? There we go. And there, yeah, there's our back. I think I saw it. Put in dot only. It happened kind of fast. Dot only. Run it again, and now let's watch the backspace. Taylor, 2 R's. Yep, backspace. Look at that. It worked. Fantastic. Okay. So we can type anything, and we can type at different speeds. Maybe I want to type it 450. Paint like my mom or me. It's genetic. Type incredibly slow. So let's watch the second typing. That's actually not so bad. That's actually pretty good. Okay. Right. So that worked. Although you notice it's fetching every time. That's a bit slow, isn't it? Because it's like less than I think it's a third a second. Now it's fetching constantly. So we should probably address that in our tests. Not today. All right. This works great. Now, you may have noticed something else redundant about my tests. Make this a little faster. I'm doing this every time. This test suite is all about this input. I should save this, shouldn't I? Because this is duplicated code. So I want to save this And I'll put it in my before each. Let's put it right here. Let's go here and put this in the before each. Let's just get the input there instead. There we go. Okay. So now I can, before each test, I will get the input field. And then I can do a type. Great. Okay. Psi type maybe? I can't, can I? Because we know that Cypress says you can't do psi type. You have to get something and then type. Well, what do I do? Well, we know we shouldn't make a variable. I can't go const input and then use it. First off, it's not in scope. But secondly, we can't do it. It doesn't work, right? It would get the empty one. So how do I save this so I can use this later on here? It turns out we can save it as what's called an alias in Cypress. We can save it as, give it a name. Pick a name. We'll call it the input field. And now I can use that as a psi dot get. Dot get, and I want to get that input field and then type into it. And let's watch what happens. Let's put my, that's fine for now. You probably saw there's an error. And sure enough, there's an error. What's going on? Okay, what's it saying? It says trying to find or expected to find an element input field, but never found it. What am I doing here? I'm doing a psi.get input field. Remember, this is like jQuery, $.get. What would jQuery do if I said $.get input field? It's going to try to find pointy bracket input field, isn't it? That's just jQuery. It's a selector. So I can't do that. There is no element. And it even says it tried to find an element called input field, couldn't find it. Well, I can't go dot because that would get a class of input field. I can't go hash or pound and I get an ID. So I have to use something else. And Cypress had to decide what they would use as a prefix for aliases. And they chose an at, which is kind of cool. A at, I think it matches. So if you save as, you get as at. And the same thing would go here. We'd have two of those. And now our input field saved. And does it work? It does. In fact, if you look at our code now, oh, that's the really slow typing. Yeah. We saved this alias. Input is aliased as input field. Very cool. So we saved this before each, and then we simply got the alias that we saved earlier. So it's very, very useful. Okay. So this is how we interact with inputs. This is very common. You can control the speed as well, right? Do something else. Now let's do something more, a more realistic end-to-end test. Let's take this. I'm going to copy the file. I really feel like getting in trouble today. So what can go wrong with copying a file? We all know. I'm going to test the API, the actual fetching of my data. So I'm going to call this my API spec. So when my app runs and I type something in, such as Taylor, it a little spinny happens there. It's kind of hard to see. Space, there's a spinny, and it fetches all my stuff. Okay, so I want to verify that this actually works. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to say, well, does the spinner even work? If you type in an S, it should give me a little spinner. That's my first test. So let's make this test for these for API results. There we go. Okay, so this is all the same. Before each, that sounds fine. Get my search field, that's fine. And I'll even grab my this, because this is pretty normal. I'd get the input and do a type there. So we want to say shows the spinner or displays the spinner after typing because we know the spinner indicates that it's doing an API fetch on our search. Okay, so this is pretty much the same. So I'm going to type Taylor Swift. All right. And let's just watch what happens. Let's give it a try here. So I'm going to close this test now, open up my new test, which is now API. It is, and Taylor is kind of slow. I should speed up a little more. Okay. Okay, so let's trace my test. So visit, get, there's my type. And you notice before and after. Let's click on that. There. After and before. So there we go. So it's working. Now you notice it also shows us the fetches. There's our request response. Okay. It did 2 of them because I was typing too slow. There. So it shows the request here, and it shows the response that I got back. There. Request, response. So here is during the request, spinner showing. And there's after the response I got back from the API. So you can even trace the API call. And there's my spinner. Now it's hard to see, but I can actually inspect here as well. It's a live browser. I can inspect that element right inside the Cypress browser. And it should tell me that this one is an image with a class of spinner. So now I know what to look for. Okay. So I'm going to do a sci.get and image class of spinner. Right. And that's my test. It will either be there or it won't. It's kind of the only 2 choices, isn't it? And it's self-asserting. Let's watch my test execute now. Okay, my test passed. And there's my get spinner. It'd work. Okay. I typed Taylor Swift. I saw the spinner, and my request and response all worked. Okay, so you notice this was 2 things, self-asserting, and it waited until the spinner showed. Okay. These are synchronous, where we can treat them like synchronous commands because Cypress will just wait. Unlike with Jest, we had to handle this asynchronous nature with awaits or promises. Just write your stuff. Cypress will wait for you until this thing appears, and it waited for this to appear. So this is great. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and try to fetch some real data. Okay. So right now I can verify that I fetched some Taylor Swift. Let's speed Taylor up because that's a bit slow. Let's go 150. There we go. Okay. I could, of course, just test my data. And the first one should be 1989 Taylor's version. Okay. But I'm going to an external site, aren't I? I'm going to, looks like itunes.apple.com, what I can see here, and fetching data. I think yesterday we talked about being careful when you use external sites for tests. Did Andy mention that yesterday? Gotta be careful because it might not always be the same results every time. This is Apple. And we know that Apple changes things every day, right? So who knows what I'm going to get tomorrow when I run this search. But I want to test for this. I want to test that I got some specific data back. I want to test that I got maybe 30 things back. And the first one was this one, but that might not be the case tomorrow. And I think Andy mentioned this concept of flaky tests, where your tests do not behave the same way each time because you have an external dependency. And right now, I'm depending on iTunes. Probably not a good thing to depend on to get the same results. So I need to fix this. Okay. I want to have what's called fixed data. It's like the old story of the playing dice with the fixed dice, right? You got these dice that are fixed and you throw them, and every time they come up 6s every time. So those dice have been fixed. Well, I want fixed data. Data will always give me the same results every time. Okay. And we can do this in Cypress. Let's make another test. So now we're going to say fetches data from the API. And let's test that it fetches the iTunes data first. All right. Let's just make sure that we got something. So I'm going to look at my data. Let's go to here. And let's do an inspective here. Just inspect. And if I fetch something, I do end up with a bunch of articles. So a whole bunch of articles with a class of album. So that's the results of this fetch. Before that, if it's empty, there are no articles. Empty. So there's no articles. So I can at least test if the articles show up. So that I can test that here. So I probably can say, I can do a get on any article with a class of album. So why not? I'll just go here and I'll say sci.get article with a class of album. There. Okay. Did I get articles with the class of album? Let's watch my test. And I did. Okay. So I got a bunch of them. Now you can see it being asynchronous. There's the end of my request, but there's my fetch. These oftentimes will show up in different order because I did my get here, but then my API finished here, but the get waited. So sometimes the order looks a little wonky because of asynchronous, but it worked. But that's as far as I can go. I really can't test what's in those articles because it's not dependable. Okay. I mean, we all know Taylor Swift has some great albums, but she might make a new one tomorrow that starts with the 1981 and it shows up first. Who knows? Okay. So I probably shouldn't rely on this data. Instead, I should fix the data. And that is use what's called fixtures. You'll hear the term mock data or fixture data. It's really data that's been fixed. It's fixed in place and never changes. And we have this directory here called fixtures. And this is where fixtures go. They're JSON files, or they can be JSON files. In this case, there. This looks some random fixture. They just give you this out of Cypress examples. So I've got a file that I can use to fix. Let me grab this file. There. Got an iTunes.json file right here. Okay, so there's some fixture data, some sample results back from iTunes from the artist Daft Punk. Yeah, okay. Totally know who they are, right? So now whenever I do an API call, I'm going to get Daft Punk. Yeah, okay. I'm excited. Let's give it a try. So how do I make it so I always get this? Because simply putting it in there doesn't do a thing. I'm still going to get Taylor. So how do I change my test so that instead of getting the data from iTunes, I get it from these fixtures? And that's done with a thing called intercept. So let's take a look. Let's just make another test. We'll say fetches fixture data. There, in the API. Okay. We'll leave everything the same, but now we're going to fix the game, as it were. And this is done with what's called an intercept. I love that term. It sounds like Top Gun. Intercept. And we can do intercept. Let's search for intercept. So intercept. There. Okay. So we can add what are called intercepts. And it's just, oh, there. Take a second. There, slider intercept. It has various formats. We can intercept some data. For example, we can say intercept every get command and to this URL. So intercept every get with that URL. And we can tell it to do something. Okay, we can give it some this. We can tell for every intercept, we give it some options. Okay. So I'm going to intercept every get. Let's take a look at let's go to my network tab. There it is. There's the get that I did right here. So let's go ahead and do a Taylor. So there's my sample get. There it is. It's kind of hard to see. Get, and then this big long thing, /search ? And then some more stuff. So I can do pattern matching. I don't need to type in this whole thing. That's a lot of stuff to type. But I can see that it's an API call, which means it's an AJAX call. And that's what intercept does. It intercepts AJAX calls. I'm going to intercept every time I do a get, I'm going to look for /search. That's all I need. So any get that has /search inside it, I want to intercept that. Let me add this. So I'm going to put this right here before it doesn't really matter where, I'll put it at the beginning here. I'll say intercept there. And I want to intercept every get that looks like wildcard /search, and then, well, anything. So like a pattern. If you see /search in the get of an AJAX call, intercept it. And then we can say, but do what? And I can say the next parameter is, I'll give it an options, which is fixture. One of the options, I can say fixture. And my file, itunes.json. How easy is that? Remember in Jest, using our testing library, it was kind of hard. The mock data there was pretty difficult to set up. It says, hey, here's your file, go for it. So very, very simple to set up intercepts. I love JSON. I love JSON, and I love Cypress. It is really cool, okay? It makes everything easy to use. So now every AJAX call will simply feed this data. Let's watch our test now, okay? Go to our test. Okay. Fetches fixture data. I'll put an only on the next one. Okay, let's take a look. There's our get. Okay, well, that is not Taylor Swift. I can tell you right now. Yes. Random access memories. Yeah, wasn't that Taylor Swift in her early days? I don't think so. Okay. So as you can see, regardless of what we typed in here, we always fetched this data. There we go. There we go. Sorry, get. Okay, so there's a response. So now we can start doing some assertions. Did I get the proper things? So I can do an assertion. For example, I could say my main should now contain random access memories. Now I'm going to change my test so it looks normal. Let's type in Daft Punk. Doesn't matter, but it makes our test make kind of sense now. Okay, so now we want to assert that we did actually get some articles with random access memories. So I'll do a get main and check. Excuse me. Right. So I'm going to do get album article, and I want to say, do these contain, or let's do main, get main. My main. Do the easy way. Get my main, and it should contain an article that contains the text random access memories. Let's verify that. So there's my get, and I'll give it a contain. So another way to get is contains. There's also a contains as well. So contains works both ways. Let's verify that. Let's go to contains. Contains is a great one. There. So we can use get, and we also contains by itself. This one works both ways. We can chain it off of something else, or just do a side contains for the entire document. But I want to be safe. I want to maybe get my main first and then do the contains, just to be a little more precise. Okay. So contains and random memories. Yes, I know it well. Memories. Let's double check. Okay, let's run our test. Okay, there's our visit, there's our get. Got the input field. We typed stuff in there. We looked for the spinner. We got some stuff. We got our main, and then we got the one that contains, kind of hard because it's up top. We have a passing test. Okay, so this is all we need because this is self-asserting. So that really is the end of the road for this test. Okay, so let's do one more test. Okay, we're going to do a much more involved test. I'm going to put a dot only because they're kind of slow. So let's make a dot only. It's going to start off the very same way. Dot only. Okay, but now when I fetch my data, what I want to do is once I have it, I want to see what if I uncheck the explicit checkbox. That red one should disappear. So if I uncheck that, it should be gone. So that's my end-to-end test. I'm probably going to check if it's there to begin with first. We'll add that later. So right now we're here. So it's kind of the same test. Fetch is fixture to end. We'll just say hides explicit albums if the explicit unchecked. There we go. Okay. So we've done this before, so let's go ahead and grab some of our code. So uncheck explicit. We'll do it this way. So I'm going to grab this here. There. So we're going to grab, now this one has a ID of, we're going to double check that. Let's grab that checkbox. Inspect. ID was, well, easy, explicit. So easy to find. So explicit. And it should be checked when we start. Okay. Now I could put this here, or this could be here. It doesn't really matter. I'll put it here for now. Okay. In fact, I'll put this, let's just put it here for now, just to be absolutely sure, kind of at the beginning of our test. Put this right here. Yeah. Make it more sense. Okay. Let's go to my test. So, yep, explicit was checked. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to uncheck that checkbox. Get the same one, and we'll do an uncheck. And now it should not be checked. Let's carry on. Great. So far, everything's working. But I want to also verify that my daft club is gone. So I probably should do the same thing, get my main, but now it should not contain. So I'll say, well, let's put a should. I'll say get album, get main, I'll get album or article. I get article with a class of album. So I'm going to get a bunch of things. This is an array, and it should not contain. So I'll put an assertion here. Should. Okay, and I'll say not contain. And the text it shouldn't contain. In this case, it's daft club. There we go. So there's my complete test. Let's run it and see. Okay, so there's a pretty representative end-to-end test. We visit slash, we have an before each for that, plus we saved it as a base URL. We found the input field, we typed something in there, we got our explicit checkbox, checked it was unchecked, it was, then we got the input field again, and we typed in Daft Punk. Waited for the spinner, it was there, kept on going. We got some articles. So far, so good. Then we said, let's do a get on main. And it should contain that. It does. Then we found our checkbox explicit. We unchecked it. We got our articles, and they did not contain Daft Club. And there we have one complete end-to-end test. This is how we build them. We build them incrementally, and they are fun. As you can see, this is great. It's to every step of your test. Cypress makes it very, very easy. Okay, let's do one more thing before we wrap up today. Okay. Oh, a question is, should we check if it's there in the first place? Hey, yeah, not a bad. I like that. Thank you, Anna. I like that. Let's do that. We have a couple seconds more. Why don't we say we're going to put this here, and before we check this, we're going to say Daft Club should contain. There. I'm going off script. What can go wrong? Let's watch. I love it. I love living dangerously. Am I only still there? Good. Okay. Well, so far so good. It worked. Yes. Okay. So now memories, and it does contain Daft Punk. We checked more. Okay. All right. So it's all there. Okay. So a really useful end-to-end test. This is an art. As you can see by now, this is an art. There are many ways you can do things, and we choose the best way to do our tests. We try to avoid using classes that are for UI, but we didn't have much choice because there wasn't much in this app I could use, unfortunately. So I would not normally try to find maybe dot radius as the input, but I had no choice in this case. So that's writing tests. One more thing before we wrap for the day. What we've done is close our test. Okay, and we'll close our, there. Close our Cypress. What we can do now, we've been running Cypress in what's called development mode, developing the tests. But this is not how you run tests. You don't like go to a room and like click start on all the tests. No, you don't do that. Of course not. That's the same as having a bunch of co-op students clicking on mouses. Okay, also would take time. We want these to run as an automated test. So to do that, we can actually, in our package.json, we can tell Cypress to run in a different mode. We'll call it Cypress run, and we'll say Cypress run. And this runs Cypress, as you probably guessed, CLI, in the command line only with no graphics. And this is how we'd run your end-to-end tests overnight, because they could take hours, right? As you can see, what if we test like my mom typing super slow? You have a whole suite of tests of my mom testing. Well, that alone would take half an hour. So these can take some time. So we're on overnight. And I'm not staying up overnight to watch some screen. So we want to watch what happens later. Let's take our tests. There's our Cypress. There we go. By the way, notice this. What's this look like? Looks a lot like Morgan, doesn't it? Turns out Morgan is also included in Cypress. So a lot of tools we already know. Okay, so let's do a clear. And now we're going to run our tests in CLI mode, npm run Cypress run. Let's watch what happens. There we go. My only's all gone. I think I took them out. Oh, it's still there. There. Let's just stop and start it again. Oops. Yeah, always take out your onlys. How am I doing with my onlys? This one, That only's gone. How's my typing only? So, yeah. Before you do your test and before you actually submit your project, make sure onlys are all gone. They're great to work with, but you can forget them. Okay, right again. My onlys are all cleared out. Try it again. This may take a minute or two, as you can imagine. Fires up its internal electron. It's firing up a headless one now, which means no graphics. It's still there, it's just not showing now. There we go. It's running my, oh, 2 tests passed. It's a good sign. Now, we know they all pass. So we know we're likely going to get this thing passing. Although I have discovered sometimes things that pass in the UI don't pass in the CLI because CLI is a bit faster and you get some timing of some asynchronous things not quite happening. There are ways around that. We can use what are called side waits to wait for certain events to happen. Oh, so far, so good. There's my API tests. There we go. Success, 26 seconds. So certainly a lot faster than a Jest test, wasn't it? Okay. I have all my tests passing. So I would get this report at the end. But you may have noticed something. Anyone notice anything interesting about these tests when they ran? Anything interesting caught your eye? Like that word right there? Video. What's it doing? It made a video file. And sure enough, in my project, now I have a directory called videos of all my tests. So if I come back in the morning, a test has failed. Well, let's see what happened with the API test. Let's watch that test, shall we? Oh, let's watch it. There's my test. Wow, huh? This is awesome. I love Cypress. Yeah, there my whole test, my Daft Punk. There's here we go, second test. Well, they all passed. But of course, it's more useful if one fails. You can see where the test failed, right? So Cypress is really awesome. It's a fantastic tool. I would do it all day if I could. And we have some exercises in Compass with Cypress. They're really enjoyable and not stressful at all. Really easy stuff. Find stuff in the DOM, do a quick jQuery type selector search, and you're good to go. All right, thank you, everyone. That's our talk today on Cypress. Have a great rest of your day. Okay, see you later.